Welcome to the Glory Day Sports Morning Show. Jake is having some technical difficulties. I think I'll do the intro today, and he'll realize once I start talking.
Crushing it.
Yeah, I had to fill in there, but yeah, we'll wait till Jake gets it taken care of. We got a little bit on the agenda. Jonathan, you want to go through the agenda?
Sure. Yeah. So first thing, good morning. Good morning, everybody. We're going to be talking a couple of things today. First things first, we got some talk around the presser that we had yesterday. Yesterday, we had the first official coaches presser. So we got to hear from new head coach Brian Callahan, Nick
It's the last
Holtz,
time
the
we've had
OC.
that, man. It's amazing, wasn't
It was incredible. Denard Wilson continued to rally the troops. I mean, every time you hear him talk, you think this guy, he's a head coach next year. Like don't get too attached. He's gonna be a head coach next year. So yeah, had a good presser. And then of course we have some AFC South rankings that we're gonna go through position by position, talk about those, break those down, and that'll be interesting. That's been floating around a lot. So we got Jake back. Jake, you back?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we got you now.
Okay, my shit all went down. But yeah, I heard you guys going over what we're talking about today. If you guys are checking us out for the first time, stop what you're doing, head over to YouTube, go type in Glory Days Sports, find this video on there, hit subscribe, join the comments section, drop your questions, and join the conversation. But like they were saying, we're talking AFC South. We're going to talk about this presser. We're going to talk a little bit about these top 30 visits. I think we are at somewhere around 13 to 14 visits. We've gotten to kind of a wide net casted so far in regards to that. They've got guys like Malik Neighbors, Joe Alt, who obviously we're looking at in the first round. And they got guys like Rasheen Ali, running back out of Marshall, who's kind of anticipated as that 7th round, maybe undrafted free agent. Just kind of going briefly over the list, they've got Chris Abrams-Drain, Jarvis Brownlee Jr., I think there's one other cornerback on this list. McKinley Jackson out of Texas A&M, Marshawn Lloyd, Roman Wilson, Joe Alt, Rasheen Ali, Kalen Carson, Malik Neighbors, J.C. Latham, Junior Colson, and then we've added here very recently Jordan Morgan to the mix, tackle/guard out of Arizona, and then Tavondre Sweat, who has been in the news this week a little bit, has been
You said he
just happened to be
jumpsuit.
Nothing. I think it was like 4:30 in the morning. Nothing good happens after 2, and it just so happens to be right after we talked about Tavondre Sweat with Mike Herndon. So I don't think we've seen this happen with other prospects in the past. It's not going to drop him down boards too much. I put out a tweet that I was like, hey, we're going to get him at the 106 pick in the 4th round. He's probably still going to the 2nd round. There's been players that have done a lot worse and got away with a lot more. It might drop him a few spots, but I don't see that being detrimental at any way, shape, or form. Out of these top 30 visits, are there any guys that really stand out to you guys?
I mean, I'd say, one of the guys, of course, was Sweat. I'm not really too high on him in the 2nd round at 38. That's not what I want. I really wouldn't even want him at 50, to be honest, just because of the value. But you can't deny that he's a good player, and he's already gone through a little bit of adversity. He showed, like I said earlier, he showed up in an orange jumpsuit to Nashville. So, that's a player I'm looking at, and if he drops a little bit more, that's somebody that I think would be a really good pairing with Big Jeff, man. I mean, that really, I ain't gonna say it solidify the D line because we still have a lot more work. We need some help at edge on the D line. But it'll at least allow us to work inside out and allow Key and allow Honor Landry to get one-on-one matchups on the outside, which is something that I think they both need. They're not going to, beat double teams consistently. So if we can get them one-on-one on islands with tackles outside, I think our pass rush wouldn't be as bad as it looks on paper.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that stand out to me on this list. Seeing how much work they've done on Malik Neighbors is really cool. It's not surprising. I think it fits the mold. And if I was a fly on the wall in those offices of the conversations they've had pre-draft, I would assume that Malik Neighbors is their top on the top of their board. He's the first guy. If he's there, he's getting picked. And to kind of tie in the presser conversation, Brian Callahan talked for nearly an hour, it felt like yesterday. And one of the things he said was obviously there's some opportunity to add wide receiver talent still. And there's a lot of opportunity for just picking the best player available. He was really, really big on when you're picking that high, you pick the best player available. So, I don't think they're blowing smoke. They've been very transparent this entire time. I think if the right guy is there, that's not a tackle, that they'll take him. I also think Bowers is on the board based on some of the things he said too. So yeah, as far as the top 30 visits, all the work they've done on Malik Neighbors is really interesting. I really like Tavondre Sweat. Brian Callahan also said in the presser, like, hey, look, kids are young and dumb. They do silly stuff and bad stuff. The only thing that's a little concerning, whenever you get arrested for blood alcohol and you're potentially driving, like obviously that's not just a little mistake that you make. That's a serious thing. People can get hurt or even killed, and that's very serious. So I don't know if that was the case. I won't speak on it that way. Other than that, if it was something more minor than that, then I think it's a slap on the wrist type of thing too. It wouldn't stop me from drafting a guy. I don't think it condemns him as a person. A little concerning at the most, but Junior Colson on there is really interesting. A lot of work I'm assuming they're doing on a guy like JC Latham, which is also interesting. And a couple of names I didn't really expect, like, Rasheen Ali, okay, cool. I think some of these later round guys that end up on top 30 visits are really interesting because it says, okay, we've done a decent amount of work, but there's still something to be learned. Because I feel like that's the two things of bringing a guy in for a visit, right? It's like you want to carve through and be absolutely certain that the high grade you have on a player is truly that. And then on the flip side of that, for the later round guys, you are trying to uncover things that you couldn't figure out because you don't have enough tape or whatever it might be. So yeah, I don't put a ton of stock into it, but I do think it is important because I do think you see quite a few guys come in for that reason. And guys like Darius Robinson, I know they had him for a virtual meeting, but it would be cool to see, do you bring him in as an official visitor? Like, okay, cool, we have everything we need. So there's a lot of factors there, but pretty happy so far with the list.
I think the biggest thing that surprised me is they've only brought in one linebacker, and that's Junior Colson, which we don't even know if that's a local visit or if it's going to count towards their top 30, just because we don't know how he was transported there. Malik Neighbors, like you brought up, they've done their due diligence on him, bringing him in for just about every meeting that they legally can at this point. So, and then going back to the presser, Brian really talked about their need to fill the slot role. Malik can do that for you. He can be moved around all over the line of scrimmage, and he can eventually take that Calvin Ridley role from you. But he is super dynamic. He came out earlier this week. What I saw is he did not want to go to the Giants, and putting that out there pretty publicly, unless they get a better quarterback, I think is what he stated. So that could cause him to fall a little bit. You guys know he's the top number one player on my big board. I think there's no way that he isn't successful. He might be a diva, but I like my receivers like I like my women. I'm mentally unstable. So I'm all on board for that. If we look at last year when Rome was in his rookie season as a GM, they did bring in 3 people off that top 30 list. And that was, I think it was, let me pull it up, Jalen Duncan. Then they brought in Will Levis and Tajay Spears. Those are the 3. So half of their draft class last season, 3 of the 6 players, were brought in for top 30 visits. So this is something we should pay attention to, but it's not the end-all be-all by any means. There might not be a single draft pick off this, but they're doing their due diligence, which obviously we got to keep on track on that. As far as the presser goes, there was a couple tidbits in there. Denard Wilson just got me fired up as usual, but I didn't see anything overwhelmingly that stood out. He's high on Kenneth Murray, which we assumed you probably would have been since they brought him in. And then the only other thing that I saw that kind of standed out is going back to the slot position. They did not bring up Treylon Burks' name. And it could just be a lapse in something that he wasn't thinking about at the time. They brought in Mason Kinsey, NWI, Kyle Phillips, and these other guys that can really fill into that role. I don't see this as a nail in the coffin for Treylon Burks by any means, because you're still going to have a rotation on the outside, even with Ridley and Hopkins. But I know B-Will, you're super high on Treylon Burks moving into the slot. Do you see that as any concern or anything for you?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm really high on it. I mean, for his sake, to get the most out of him, I think that's the best option for him. But as a team, as a Titans, somebody that follows the Titans, that's not plan A. Plan A would be to have somebody like Neighbors in the slot. He's going to step in and be one of the top slots in the league if, first year, that he's that talented of a guy, yak ability, stuff like that. Treylon, I mean, for him, it's all about off the field. For me, he has to get to love football. He has to get to want to, make it really a big part of his life. And I don't know if that's where we're at with Treylon right now. There's just there's a couple things that's off the field that's not ideal that he does. And it's not anything illegal or anything that. It's just the way, for a football player in the NFL, you really want them for football to be their whole life. And I don't think that's with Treylon. And it doesn't have to be, but for me as a first round pick, that's who I'd want. But, go ahead.
Let me argue the opposite side. Let me play
Mhm.
devil's advocate here. I think Treylon, a lot of what he had to come in and do, let's be honest. First, he had to come in and be AJ Brown. And that's really unfair for a lot of reasons, right? Especially considering he was coming in to be AJ Brown in a beaten up Titans offense that got worse after losing their best offensive coordinator in a long time, after losing, their stud left tackle. Like, there was a lot of things about the offense that wasn't necessarily better. And Treylon was asked to come in and be AJ Brown. And he's just not that. So I think for starters, you kind of have to give him the benefit of the doubt a little bit on how his career got started. Now, I think the primary concern with Treylon is like his health, right? Like, he has to be available. And, taking a look at his history, he kind of got the short end of the stick a little bit. Like, the first couple injuries were on him. Like, going into training camp, he was with his asthma, he wasn't in shape. That's on him. But going into the concussion stuff where it was a dirty hit from, I don't remember who the safety was or who the defensive back was for the Eagles. It might have been CJ Gardner-Johnson. I can't remember, but a really dirty hit in that Philly game that gave him a history of concussions that ended up not going very well. So, it's hard to say, like, how do you protect yourself better in moments where you're diving for the ball and going for it? So to me, I think that he's had a rocky start, and the primary issue with Treylon is his health. If he can stay healthy, then in an offense that is better situated for playmakers and pass catchers, he now he doesn't have to be wide receiver one. Going into this year, he doesn't have to be the guy, which gives him the ability to stay healthy. It gives him the ability to be in a rotation where it doesn't require him to potentially put himself at a health risk. And it gives him a chance to have like a normal rotation and have like a normal, career. So this is the make it or break it year for Treylon. Obviously, you don't go into the season as him being your plan or your primary option at the slot or whatever. Right. But he should be a critical rotational piece and should have the best year of his career to date and should be able to kind of revive under a very pass-friendly scheme that should benefit him.
See, I would agree with most of that if he had shown us the ability to do that so far, and he just hasn't. This for him, in this system that he's going to be in, he's not going to be running 20 yards down the field, able to open up. He's going to be short passing game, catch the ball, make a guy miss. And to be frank, you can count on two hands how many times he makes guys miss in the open field now, especially last year, whether that's injuries or what. I think it's his weight. And I'm not saying that he's playing overweight by not being in shape, but I think it's his build is that he's not making guys miss at whatever he's weighing. It's like 225, 230. He's not making guys miss. So in the slot, those guys are going to be a lot smaller. Those guys are going to be a lot quicker. He can't even make outside corners miss, the taller, lengthy guys miss. So I do not think he'll be able to miss the smaller guys miss. But people can also say on the flip side of that, his size he'll make guys miss with that. But he hasn't shown to really do that either. So that plus he had some drop issues towards the end of the year last year. I'm just not overly confident with him at the slot. And I wouldn't make any plans roster-wise with Treylon Burks. I just wouldn't. I would take a guy. Yeah, I would take a slot like Malik Washington in the 4th round, and I would play him over Treylon Burks just because of the yak ability. We gotta inject some yak ability into this receiving core that we don't have. Hop doesn't have it. Ridley's okay, but we don't have anybody that's gonna make a guy miss outside of Spears and Pollard, and we've got to inject that into this team. we can't run screen passes to our receivers because we don't have anybody that can make a guy miss. And that's a critical part of the offense. That's something, Callahan and the Bengals, I want to say over 60% or around 60% of their passes last year were in the flats. You throw the ball to Traylon in the flats, what's he going to do? He's going to catch it, but what's he going to do after that? You know what I mean?
Well, I think Traylon has to rely on his big body, right? Like he's a big physical receiver, and that's what he did well in college. Was he got the ball in space, and when he was one-on-one with the defender after he has the ball, he can get physical, right? So, and I think that's what you kind of hope that he turns into. Like, I don't think you're right. He's not necessarily like a yak god by any means, but his issue, which you hit on, is his ability to separate, past the line of scrimmage, right? And that's his. So if he can get a ball in short space, that might be different. Like, he can fight for a couple yards, like a big body running back. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see. I mean, I'm in the same boat with you. You don't plan your offseason to go, okay, thank God we have all of our wide receivers because Kyle Phillips and Traylon Burks are back there. You have to hope that those guys can contribute this year and show that they deserve to be on the roster next year, because that's what it is. It's going to be make or break for them if they can contribute to the team. And like I said, if Traylon stays healthy, I expect somewhat of a breakout season from him. I do. I think the talent is there. I think it's just a matter of can he put it together? Because at this point, you're right, we haven't seen it. And I think it's not because he doesn't have the ability, it's because he just hasn't been able to stay healthy.
Right. And, the health is one thing, but I'm not going to say he helped himself either. So that's my thing with him. I understand being injured and stuff like that, but if you're not helping yourself off the field, you're coming into camp overweight, your first training camp in the NFL, the biggest opportunity of your life, and you're coming in overweight. Where's your mindset at with that? You know what I mean? You're the number. I understand the only people that levied those type of AJ Brown expectations on him were us. And we've got to take responsibility for our lofty expectations of Traylon Burks to step in and be AJ Brown. Mm-hmm. How many people knew about Traylon Burks before we drafted him, genuinely thought of, hey, that's a guy we could have could replace Julio or something like that? Nobody, that wasn't even a conversation. So let alone him come in and replace AJ Brown. It's unfair, but he's got to do better. He's got to help himself first. And I haven't seen him try to help himself. He had a full offseason last year. He had a semi-full offseason last year. He's got a full offseason this year. I want to see him come in trimmer, quicker. If he doesn't do that, to hell with it. We'll see.
Do we know that he's overweight though? I saw that on Twitter. I saw the screenshots of him walking into camp.
I'm not saying he's overweight now. I'm saying he plays. I'm saying he plays too heavy. It's a difference. I say he plays too heavy right now.
Yeah, I hear you.
His body type is not conducive to what we need him to do. And what he needs to be in the NFL, he needs to make more guys miss. He's got to create more separation. And at that body type he has, he's not going to do that.
This will be the year because he's set up to succeed now. You could argue that before he wasn't. Like you're a rookie who was drafted maybe a little higher than he should have been. He was wide receiver 4 in that class or something. Right. There are a ton of opportunity, loads of potential. But if you it's just like drafting a very good quarterback into a really terrible offense. You're going to have look at Bryce Young last year. He was far and away quarterback 1 in the draft, and he stunk bad. You can't really put all that on him. He was in an offense that was god awful. So we'll see. I'm higher on Traylon Burks than a lot of people are. I think I see the glimmer of potential, but he's got to stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, then he's going to get injected into a really, really great passing scheme that is going to highlight what he does best. And that's the exciting part for me.
Let's look at this real quick. What does that say about Traylon Burks? And I'm higher on Traylon Burks than a lot of people too, but I'm higher than him, but my expectations for him are where they are. What does that say about him in the press conference? That one, he's not, and he could have slipped Callahan's mind. Okay, we'll put that in there. We'll put that on the side. But what does that say about him that he's mentioned in the names of Nick Westbrook-Akina and Kyle Phillips? He shouldn't even be mentioned with those guys, with all due respect to them.
Yep. Yeah.
I think we were
Kyle Phillips too. Go ahead, Jake. Sorry.
I think we were just promised this AJ Brown, Deebo Samuel level of receiver coming out when he's not that clearly. He's not going to break the tackle. He's not going to slip into the end zone that way. He's great at going up and catching the ball at the high point, but that's the only thing he really does well, in my opinion. You're not going to use him as this gadget receiver out of the backfield or anything like that. So,
Jake, who promised us that he was going to be that guy?
Nobody promised us that. It
That
was
was us.
media that
We
put
made it.
that on his
That was
shoulders
us.
and weighed him down.
Well, when you get
Yes.
traded for
We did
when
that.
AJ Brown gets traded for that pick and then you select him,
Yeah.
and he's a wide receiver
natural.
with a similar build, they were calling him AJ Brown at the draft. That
Mel
was his
Kiper.
draw. So it's like, bro, you can't really. That's what I'm saying. Like the expectations we put on him are really unfair, but even more so because of the situation that he got drafted into. Like he was not going to develop and be the guy that he needed to be. We talk about it this year. Like you look at the 3 receivers that are at the top of the draft this year. You have Rome Odunze, you got Malik Neighbors, and Marvin Harrison Jr. All of these guys are wide receiver ones in any other draft. But the difference is they all kind of have a varying different skill, and teams should consider certain players based off of what their current talent and current schemes are. So is it crazy to see Rome Odunze drafted as the first wide receiver? No, it's not crazy. I don't think it's crazy at all because the team that drafts him might decide that that particular skill set fits what they need right now. Treylon Burks was not the player that the Titans needed after you traded away A.J. Brown. Treylon Burks was not A.J. Brown. The offense needed A.J. Brown. So that is the example here. And I think that it's fair to assume like, okay, after 2 seasons, you get a little healthier. Like, let's make this work. So, yes, it's 100% make or break, and this is all on Treylon. And Nick Holtz did talk about it. He did talk about it. Treylon did come up, and he said, and I loved what he said, these guys are not straying away from giving us straight answers, and it is a fresh breath of fresh air. Because Nick Holtz straight up said, look, Treylon's going to have to create opportunity for himself. He's going to have a chance. He's got a load of potential. But he's got to earn it. He's got to earn his playing time. He literally said that verbatim, and I love that. And that's where he's at. So
one more thing before we move to the next point. What do we think about, and this is a guy that Hop was mentored by when he was in Arizona, a guy that he looked at, and even Andre in Houston sort of did the same thing. What do we think about Hopkins in that Boyd role in the slot that'll allow us to get a guy like Odunze and Marvin Harrison? I don't think that's off the table itself either.
No.
That'll prolong his career.
Nick Holtz said that. Okay, so that's another thing that happened in the presser. Nick Holtz said that they are installing packages where they're moving their guys all around the field. He literally said that. So we know that's the case. And that's why you don't necessarily have to go, okay, if Neighbors is there, you draft him to be your slot guy. No. If they have like a Rome Odunze, a Neighbors or somebody, they're going to take all 3 of these guys. They talked about it when they traded for, or when they signed Calvin Ridley. They want to move him around. The primary issue with Calvin is that he was stuck outside the numbers almost the entire season for Jacksonville last year. D-Hop is the same thing. Utility receiver. He talks about how good he is in all these different positions. He's not just like this X or Z receiver. So you draft. That's what Callahan's referring to. Best player available. They get to just take their favorite guy if they take a receiver because they're going to move these guys all over the place. So then that's why I think Treylon's in a good situation too, because it's like, okay, he can return to the slot. Sure. But also Treylon is not bad at stretching the field. He's done a pretty good job of going up and getting a contested ball. So, there's a lot of versatility, and that's why I'm a big fan of what's happening offensively for the Titans and why I love this coaching staff, because they are going to truly open up things from the passing scheme perspective.
I think it's just positionless football in general. We've done it with the running backs now. We're not bringing back Derrick Henry, and as soon as you put him on the field, you know what's happening. With Tony Pollard, with Tajay Spears, you're going to be able to have that versatility there. They're doing the exact same thing with the wide receiver core. You're going to be able to line up any of these starting 3 within the slot, X, Y, Z, wherever you want to put them. And you're not giving away to the defense what you're looking to do. But I've also stated in the past, I wouldn't mind seeing Nuke move into kind of like a Larry Fitzgerald did towards the twilights of his career. He played on the outside for the majority and then moved into the slot to end it and was very successful and had a renaissance in the slot. I wouldn't mind seeing that. He destroyed, and I wouldn't mind seeing that for Hopkins as well as he loses a little bit on that top end. I mean, I wouldn't mind that at all. But I think that kind of leads us into our next topic. We're going to be breaking down the AFC South, but let's just go ahead and start with the weapons. I mean, the AFC South is as loaded as it's ever been offensively, and there's going to be a lot of eyes on this upcoming season. I mean, us particularly.
Sure, I'm glad we got this, boy. This cheat sheet.
I made it a little bit easier. I got one more
Thank
for
you.
us. The other ones we're going to have to do some research. But obviously, we bring in Calvin Ridley, and Tony Pollard. You can do the 1A, 1B with him and Tajay Spears. Trevor Lawrence, ETN, Kirk. They brought in Gabriel Davis. Not super high on that pickup. And then the Colts, obviously, they got AR, another rookie from last season, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs. I was super high on Josh Downs last season. And I think he's a huge breakout candidate this year if Richardson stays healthy. And then Kyle Granson. And then we got the bells of the ball. We got CJ Stroud, bringing in Joe Mixon, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz. Couldn't even fit Tank Dell on the graphic. But how do you, Jonathan, how do you break this down as far as a weapons perspective and then also a quarterback's perspective?
Yeah, the quarterback talk I'll save for last because it's kind of it's a bit more in depth. But as far as the skill positions go, like I agree with you. I think the AFC South is looking as sharp as it ever has. It's kind of a tough conversation though, because looking at a team like Jacksonville, like they have just really well-rounded weapons across the board, right? They have good depth at their skill positions. Like even Tank Bigsby and some of the guys behind Travis Etienne are showed that they have some production there. And then the Colts, I feel the same way. A lot of people are like, Colts fans are screaming about needing a receiver. I'm like, really? Alec Pierce looked like he was coming online a little bit last year. Michael Pittman is, not a elite wide receiver one, but certainly fits the bill quite nicely for now, right? And then Josh Downs was great, like came on big time. He's I would assume we're looking at a 1K receiver next year. And maybe, a pair of 7-8 touchdowns or whatever. Like there should be some good production from Downs. And then obviously the Texans, they add a guy like Stephon Diggs that really, takes their receiving core and fills like that, really important role, that versatile role, kind of like what D-Hop is going to do for us. But breaking that down, I think that all four teams are pretty well close. I think I'll probably save my rank for when we decide to do that. But as far as the quarterback situation goes, I think will probably be a lengthy conversation that we'll all chip in on. But just to kind of glaze over it here, it's tough. Like I think obviously CJ1 is QB1 in the AFC, or CJ Stroud is QB1 in the AFC South. I think we would all agree with that. But as far as the trickle down goes, it's tough because at this point where we haven't seen as much from Will Levis or Anthony Richardson, then you almost have to kind of give Trevor Lawrence the second spot. Which I think he's earned at this point. But concerns, I think he's going into a critical year for himself. Like if he has like an okay year, that's a tough conversation. Do you still extend him with like crazy money? Because that's what they'll be looking at. And then as far as Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, it's tough to give one or the other. I think as a Titans fan, I would probably biasly give Will Levis the third spot, only because he had a larger sample size and I think showed us a little bit more. Whereas Anthony Richardson, we saw a lot less of him, though he looked really good. You just don't know. Like, I think some of the concerns that you had for Anthony Richardson coming out of college, those concerns are still there from his NFL debut and the games that he played. Like, he played well and made plays with his feet. But what happens when teams have a larger sample size of that, and then they're able to take the ground game away and they go, okay, now you have to throw the ball against us. It was the same thing as the Titans and Tannehill, right? It was like, okay, we're going to take Derrick Henry away. Now you have to throw the ball against us. So I don't know. To me, I haven't seen enough to be like, yes, he is right here. So just by circumstance, there's only 4 options and the other options are pretty solid. So I'd fit him at 4.
What about you, B. Will?
Yeah, so, skill positions, AFC South, I mean, this is probably the best the division has been, well-rounded wise. We had the days of the Colts with Marvin Harrison Jr., Reggie Wayne, Edgerrin James, and them. But across the board now, this division is loaded at receiver, not just running back like it has been. I mean, we've always had great running backs in the AFC South with Fred Taylor, Chris Johnson, Eddie George, Edgerrin James, like I mentioned before, and I know I'm missing guys. But what's his name from the Texans that went to Tennessee? Arian Foster. Him too. So
MJD.
I mean, yeah, and MJD. So we're actually rounded in the AFC South with receivers now, and it's a great thing to see. I mean, these games aren't going to be just slumber fests anymore, and they have been for a long time. Another thing, before I get to the playmakers and quarterbacks, this is the best group of play callers we've had in the AFC South as well. Steichen, I mean, he called his ass off when he came to Nashville and they came against us. Great play caller. Slowick, obviously. I mean, a lot of Titans fans wanted him, myself included. Great play caller. We'll see what what the league does with him and Stroud in their sophomore year together. And Doug Peterson has a proven track record across his whole career as being a great play caller. And Callahan by all accounts, he's going to be a really good one as well. So that going into the skill positions, I think Houston is obviously the cream of the crop. They got Tank Dell. I mean, he's a monster, man. That's somebody I wanted with us. Nico Collins is the guy who I think, and I said this on the X and One show last week, Collins is the guy that is their number one receiver for me. I don't want to hear the dig stuff.
Yep.
Collins is the number one receiver in Houston, and he's played like it. Last year he was exceptional. So, when he comes to Nashville, Snead's going to be following him. I don't think Snead's going to be following Diggs, with all due respect. But they also have Dalton Schultz, who's really came on from his and really improved from his Dallas days. So I'd rank them number one skill-wise, and I'd put us behind them with the addition of Ridley. I think he really opens up a lot with our skill position guys, and we have Pollard and Spears as well too. Just the versatility that we talked about. And Chig, he's another positionless guy that we have in our fold that I'm not going to say I'm incredibly high on him, but if we use him in the right way, he's a gadget guy at the end of the day with me, and if we use him in the right way, he could be a really good guy because he has such good yak ability.
After the catch, he is insane, huh?
He's amazing.
Incredible plays. Yeah.
You can line him up in the backfield. You can give him handoffs. You can give him sweet plays out the backfield. So he's really, really versatile. And if we utilize him right, I mean, he can be one of those guys that, fantasy guys are running to get Chig. Because if we get him the touches that he deserves, I think he could be very, very, very good. Indy, I think, is the third best skill position group right now, even without a tight end, for me. Because Jonathan Taylor, one of the best running backs in the league still. Josh Downs, exceptional year this past year as a rookie, and Michael Pittman is a solid guy. He tore us up last year. He's a good receiver. So I'm higher on them than I am Jacksonville simply because of Gabe Davis. I don't think he'll offer them much beyond verticality in that offense. He's the first one to say he can do more than be vertical, but I haven't seen it. So, we'll see about him. He's one of the best blocking receivers. We would have been in trouble if Vrabel was still with us because we would have got him. But, that's something that I'm not really high on in that group. That's not what they need. They're not going to be a ground and pound team anyway with ETN. They might be, if they transition to Tank Bigsby, they might, but that's still, I've got them last in the skill position group. When it comes to quarterbacks, Stroud is obviously quarterback one. I mean, he's that guy, and it's going to be I'm eager to see what he does in his second year. They have a full-year tape on him, full-year tape on Slowick. Defenses adjust. Defensive coordinators are smart coaches, some of the best coaches in the NFL. So let's see what they do year two. And second, and this is a lot closer for me than people think, but Trevor Lawrence is there, but he's not by much over AR and Levis to me. Those three guys you could, for me, and I know this might sound bad to Jags fans, you can flip a coin for those three guys with me, because Trevor Lawrence, he's got the weapons that he has. He did better before he had weapons, which is crazy. He's got a decent offensive line now. He's got the weapons, and he still is not making it happen with a good play caller. How much more can you give this guy? I mean, let's be honest. I think he's a little overrated by some. And same thing with you, Jonathan. I got Levis above Richardson, just sample size, and because we've seen a little bit. The highs are a lot higher for me with Levis versus Richardson. And Richardson coming off that shoulder injury, who knows? I see him throwing on grass and on air, but we'll see when he puts pads on.
Yeah, I see it very similar to you guys, and I'll go in reverse order. I'll start with the quarterbacks just because we're already talking about it. I actually have Levis behind AR as of now, but I see him very similar to how you guys see him. I see upside with Richardson. I see a great floor with Levis. And Richardson, he just needs reps. He needs reps, and you got to stay healthy to get those reps. So we'll see. That can be very, very detrimental to him if he does get injured again this season. And he's going to take hits. He's got a big body. He's going to run the football because that's what he does best. And he's still learning the intricacies of the passing game. Trevor Lawrence, got to put him at 2 just because of the track record. But like you guys said, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw either of those guys jump him this season. And I'm really interested to see if Jacksonville pays Trevor Lawrence. He's gonna be owed that huge contract here within the next couple of years. So are they going to make that investment? And then CJ Stroud, he's that guy. And yeah, we've got all the tape in the world on him this from last season. But I mean, he was still lighting it up late into last year. So I think he is that dude, but he could have that sophomore slump. Hopping into the weapons, Jacksonville, I think, is ultimately in last. They might have the best tight end out of the group, but other than that, nothing really impresses me. Zay Jones is their third wide receiver. I mean,
They got 3 number 3s.
Exactly. And they paid Christian Kirk. I don't understand that at all. I don't understand why they paid Gabriel Davis either. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just how I would not operate if I ran that football team. And then behind them, I have the Colts ultimately. You could flip these with us, though, in my opinion. I really like Michael Pittman. I really like Josh Downs. You mentioned Alec Pierce. I think he's that dude as well. And then Jonathan Taylor, I think you have to put as the best running back that still remains in the division.
Yeah,
so they're going to pound the football. They've got the ability to control the clock, I think, out of these 4. And then I have us ultimately in second with Hopkins, Ridley, and, of course, Traylon Burks, Okonkwo. Josh Wiley, I'm super high on. He was coming along late last season before the injuries kind of derailed him. And that's something I don't know if you guys got to touch about it from the presser from yesterday, but they said they're bringing in tight ends. They've only got 3 on the roster with those 2, and then Thomas Odukoye. So they're going to be looking in the draft. It doesn't mean they're bringing in Brock Bowers. I guess it's maybe a potential, but they're probably looking later in the draft, those 6th, 7th rounds, a Tip Ryman, a Brevin Spanford. They're probably bringing in a blocker. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if they brought back Trevon Wesco. I wouldn't be surprised. So they're going to bring in –
I would.
I wouldn't mind it just because he's not going to be asked to be – he's not Jeff Swain. He's not going to be asked to be Jeff Swain with this coaching staff. Mike Vrabel's gone, and thank God. But and then that leads us to C.J. Stroud and the Texans. I have them as the best quarterback and the best weapons in the AFC South, which is scary to think about. But bringing in Stephon Diggs, I think DeAndre Hopkins is better than Diggs at this point in time, but I don't think Ridley's better than Collins at this point. I think Collins is really stepping it up. And then, like we said, Tank Dell is not even fit on the graphic, and he's probably better than the majority that Jacksonville has or Indianapolis has.
But I'd say Tank Dell is a top 5 receiver in this division, and really, I don't think
100%.
he's the 4th.
Yeah, if they showed,
I would put him at 5.
If you had 3 receivers from each of these teams, like if we were evaluating the top 3 receivers, Texans are far and away better than.
Yeah, it's not a question.
Right, it's no question. So, yeah.
Tank Dell starts in every single offense in this division. He starts in many in the league.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Health is going to be just like half of these guys on this list. If he can stay healthy with that size, he's probably the most dynamic route runner out of this entire group, in my opinion. He's got the speed. He knows and understands leverage, especially at that size. But let's go ahead and hop into the offensive lineman. Probably something Titans fans don't want to talk about at this point in time, at least till after the draft.
Yeah,
And
skip the segment.
Yeah, we might as well skip it because as of right now, we're looking at, I don't even know who would be left tackle, Jalen Duncan, end of list. Obviously, we got Peter Skoronski, brought in Cush. Cush is definitely going to be up there as far as centers go. And then we're looking at a rotation of Dylan Radins, John Ojukwu, Brunskill, Andrew Rupcich. It's not a lot of guys there. Shadiq Charles coming from the Panthers, obviously.
He'll get some reps at left tackle. I'm pretty sure they're going to move him to the outside. They wouldn't have gone and signed him, and they spoke briefly about Shadiq. I know Nichols spoke briefly about him, and he started at left tackle for that championship LSU team, and he obviously did not get a chance to do much at Washington, or maybe it was coaching. Who knows? It could have been a million things. Scheme could have been a bunch of stuff, but it seems like they're going to try to plug him in at left tackle if there's not like an immediate like Joe Alt type of player that gets plugged in. But he gives you a better swing tackle than we might have had before.
He said that Charles was a guard in the press conference, if I'm not mistaken, and that could have been jargon for the press for the draft stuff.
I mean, he is a guard.
He was a guard.
He is. I mean, that he is, and that's what he's been playing. I just think that. Right. I think that there's a good chance that he ends up being a good swing tackle for like a full utility lineman, kind of like what Dylan Radins has been. But yeah, I think he has some potential at tackle. That was kind of just me speaking.
I'm not going to be mad if we see Radins at left tackle, to be honest. I mean, at least year one. I mean, I wouldn't be terribly mad at it. He played well down the stretch. So
I'm gonna bring up something that is not my thought, but Zach Lyons was mentioning it yesterday, and it was huge, big brain stuff. Said, what if they're just throwing out the smoke screen and they actually do think Peter Skoronski can play left tackle? Now, I am super. I like for Skoronski at left tackle, and I have ever since last season. Obviously, the last coaching staff did not see him that way, and Brian Callahan went on a podcast for Cincinnati before the draft and said that he thought he was a guard as well. But maybe Brian doesn't think he's a tackle, but maybe Bill does. Maybe that's why they're bringing in these guys like the Arizona tackle who has similar length. Maybe they're looking to kick somebody inside and move Skoronski out to left tackle. It's one of those things that probably nothing. But it's something to at least bring up and see. Maybe they're flipping stones that nobody else would. But then that leads us into Jacksonville. Jacksonville's got a decent line, in my opinion. They're still pretty young. The only person they brought in really to fill was that center position with Mitch Morse out of Buffalo. But they got Cam Robinson, Urza Cleveland, Brandon Scherf, Anton Harrison, who was a rookie last season, who switched from left tackle to right tackle. And was kind of coming on down the stretch, I thought. And then Indianapolis, they've been known for their offensive line for years now. Where's my list?
They got Big Q there. I mean, they've got
Bernard Raymond, Ryan Kelly, Will Fries, Braden Smith.
I like their offensive line.
I really do too.
I mean, Big Q is one of the better guards in the league. I mean, if not one of the best left guards in the league. So, they're going to move guys. And that's what I think they're going to have to do a lot of, especially going against some of these higher octane offenses. They're going to throw the ball 40, 45 times a game. They're going to have to do what we've done over the last 10 years is, clock control, take some shots downfield and really do that. Run the ball they are. I mean, they could be dangerous in that aspect.
Yeah, I feel like every team is kind of in the same spot, minus the Titans, right? Like the Titans have the most holes on the offensive line, whereas the rest of the AFC South has like one missing piece. For the Jags, it was the center. For the Texans, it's right tackle. For the Colts, it's, I guess you could argue, left tackle. They don't like Raymond, I think is what his last name is.
He's like super athletic. He's got the potential, and he started off really, really, really slow, really bad, and has since come on and is at least adequate. I think they have him at left guard now.
Right. So the point I'm making is that I would like all of these offensive lines are like right in the same range. I would say like mid-tier, like not horrible, not great, but sufficient and decent, right? For the Titans, we're clearly far under that bar as it stands currently. So that I would say that's like the major or the biggest discrepancy between the Titans and the other AFC South teams. Maybe there's like another position group or two, but for the most part, that's the one that's kind of separating them from us in a big way.
I don't think our offensive line has to be great, though. That's the thing.
No, it just doesn't have to be bottom three in the league. Yeah, if we could just make it up to the middle, like with them, we'd be good.
If we get to the middle league average, we'll be just fine offensive line wise because we'll be getting the ball out so quick. That's going to make our offensive line look a lot better, and that's why I don't really want us to get a guy like Joe Alt at 7. I think it's a little wasteful, to be honest. I mean, not when you've got so many good tackles in this draft, and I know Alt's floor is extremely high, but I'd rather have a receiver. Alt is
vanilla ice cream to me.
Yeah,
it's good.
It's just,
but it's meh.
Yeah, that's exactly how I'll feel after the draft. I'm not going to get on a stream and be mad that we got Joe Alt or anything, but I'll be a little disappointed because we've got a guy like Bill Callahan that we can take a chance on a guy and feel confident about it. And I said this, and people are going to get on me because I said, Alt was my first offensive tackle in December, but look at our coaching staff in December. We had a guy out of we had a guy out of a high school offensive line coach as our offensive line coach, Vrabel's buddy. So a guy like Alt fit us a lot better at that time than he does now. And we've got one of the better offensive line coaches in the league. And we have a guy like Callahan that is not going to have Levis sitting back there doing hard play action fakes, running Yankee 3 or 4 times a game. We don't have to worry about that anymore. It's going to be get the ball out quick, let your playmakers do their thing. And I want more playmakers with the YAC ability, especially out the slot. And that's why I think Neighbors is the guy if he's there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think,
No,
and then also trading down too, right? Like we've all been like pitching at really hard is that you don't necessarily have to take a starting left tackle. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be Joe Alt or it doesn't have to be Fashanu. It can literally be acquire assets, take the best players you can, because like there's still really good players out there that can plug in at left tackle that are more than adequate, right? You're going to get adequate middle of the road play. And, you know, like a Bakhtiari or Andres Pete, like you can go sign one of those guys for a year or two. And then you don't have this like a massive gaping hole that you had at left tackle. And so, yeah, I think, you know, and it's clear that they've said that several times. Like we got it in the presser yesterday with Brian Callahan. We want to take the best player available. It was very clear. Like they are telegraphing what they are trying to do, but they're not saying exactly who they're going to take. So I think I think that we're on the right track here. I think they're going to, if the right player is there at 7, which I personally think they will be, then I think you need to go in that direction and maybe sign a tackle. I've kind of like shifted my thought there, but I think we're all on the same page. Like regardless of what they do, they're going to be in a position that's going to improve the team. If they're trading down and taking a tackle, cool. If they're taking a receiver and then going a different direction at 38, sticking and picking at 7, cool. You're going to end up with a really talented player. I think I've kind of shifted my thought a little bit. Maybe they stay and take at 7 instead of trading down because you're not going to be in the running. You're not going to be picking at 7 again next year. This team has improved way too much. Worst case scenario, you're picking in the middle of the draft towards the 20s or something. So in this case, like get your standout guy. And I think we are in a good position to where whoever that standout guy is, we should be in good shape.
I think it's time for an honest conversation too. People can think all they want, but look at the numbers and look at the floors of these first round left tackles when they come into the league as rookies. I think you can get that floor with a guy like Andres Pete. Even a guy like it takes time for these left tackles, especially left tackle, to come in and get acclimated in the NFL with these just demon pass rushers. They didn't face a Myles Garrett last year. They didn't face a Micah Parsons last year. That first year is going to be rough, especially with them, working out all offseason. They don't really get an offseason to just rest, these prospects do. So left tackle is not something that that's not something that I want at 7, just because I think we can get that floor production out of a guy like Pete instead of Alt. And his ceiling is not that incredibly high for us to have him at 7. I'd be fine with taking him at 15 or something, but not 7. Let's get a receiver because we're not gonna be at 7 in the next couple of years. We're just not.
God forbid.
Skoronski still potentially kicking out, Jake, I think is the take of the show, because they've very clearly said like, oh, he's a guard. He was a guard because of what the previous regime thought in him. You think for a second that Bill Callahan and Brian and Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker and all those guys haven't sat and said, what if Skoronski? What if we kick him outside? And what if we don't have this glaring need at left tackle that the world thinks we do? Okay, so in press conferences, let's make it very clear. We really like Skoronski as a guard. It's literally just regurgitating everything Vrabel's been saying for a year, right? And so everyone's like, yeah, Skoronski's a guard because he's got small arms. And then meanwhile, they're like, bro, if our guy is at 7, we're just going to kick Skoronski out and make him a left tackle, which is what he was in college anyway. And then we'll plug in. We got a Shadiq Charles. We got a Dylan Radens. We got a Andrew Rupsich, which played pretty decent last year for us. Like you can fill in the guard. You can fill in Skoronski's position a lot easier than you can find that left tackle. And if you're doing that, then all of a sudden, and you're telling me an entire offseason with Bill Callahan isn't going to polish him up and get him back to where he probably was or even better. That's interesting. That's really interesting. And I think there's probably a better chance that happens than a lot of people are thinking about.
I'll tell you what, to nip that in the bud. If it's anybody seen any videos of Skoronski working out in the offseason, if he's working out left tackle, he's working out left guard. I mean, that'll tell you. They're posting videos, you'll see.
Haven't seen anything. And I think it could have been when the coaching staff was acquired, they could have been like, hey, yeah, we do see him as a guard. But they did. Brian stated yesterday that Bill has been in the office and he has been scrubbing through the tape of all of these offensive linemen that are already on staff. And maybe he went back and watched Skoronski and was like, you know what? There might be something there. But I'm in agreement. I think it's wide receiver at 7 or trade back and acquire one of these tackles. And it might be acquire one of these tackles, of Latham, a Fawanga, an Olu, and maybe you still bring in an Andres Pete to be that bridge gap in year one. Wouldn't mind that at all.
Is it a wasted opportunity if we take left tackle at 7?
I'm not going to say it's a wasted, just because it is 100% our biggest need. Would it be fucking boring? Yeah. Be real.
Hey, so
here's a couple of
here's a couple of tackles that have sized, that have graded under the traditional size length of arms in recent drafts. Okay, are you ready? In the past like decade or two, some notables: Taylor Lewan, Ryan Ramczyk, Joe Thomas, Joe Staley, Mitchell Schwartz, Donald Penn. Those are a couple of guys who, by the way, some of those gold jacket guys in there that had a less than traditional arm length and were still able to be successful, right? So like he got pegged as this dinosaur coming out of last year's draft, and then it was immediately like, okay, we can plug him into left guard. That's that coaching staff and what they were able to, Jason Hotailing, not exactly the greatest developer of offensive line talent, right? So maybe Bill comes in and goes, this kid has everything. Like, he's got a great anchor. He's got good arm strength. He's got good bend. He has all the things that a good tackle has, and his arms are a little smaller. That doesn't necessarily matter. There are guys who have done it successfully in the league. So it's all about the intellect and the ability to adapt from the player. And if Bill Callahan feels like he can get that from that player, ball game, folks, like, we're good to go. So I think, best player available that scores touchdowns is probably on the. I've almost completely shifted my thinking as time has passed in the draft process to where the Titans are going receiver at 7. Unless they get offered something crazy, I think they have to take a trade down if it's really great compensation. I don't think maybe they have a choice, but in this draft, you're cool with it. You're like, okay, if I'm getting a bunch of picks, it's worth it. But I think the Titans, their plan is to take one of these receivers.
No, so one more thing before we go ahead, Jake.
No, go ahead.
So one more thing before we move about the Skoronski and left tackle thing. I would agree with y'all, but the tape last year showed they armbarred the shit out of him, even in the interior. So those guys in the interior don't have nearly as long of arms as the guys on the outside, and that was something that teams used to beat Skoronski. It was either a bull rush or it was they beat Skoronski with 3 ways last year. One of those ways is not him. The first one is stunts. That's Brewer and Skoronski. That's communication along the offensive line.
Yep.
The second way is the arm bar. That's an issue with length. The third issue is the bull rush, which comes as a result of protecting against the arm bar being on their back feet. So those last 2 things are something that they would use against him and tear him up on the outside. That's why I want him inside. I don't want him a left tackle just because I think we'll be setting him up for failure. It's already on tape that he's been beat like that.
I mean, it's possible. I think it's not the 90s or early 2000s anymore. The game is getting smaller. You're not going up against a 290-pound defensive end. You got guys coming out like Nolan Smith out of Georgia last season. He's like 220 at edge, and it's more speed to power than power to speed at this point in the game. So there are going to be the guys out there like a Myles Garrett and these premier TJ Watts and guys that are going to give him trouble, and these guys with the extra length. I think his mirroring ability and his ability to take that speed and anchor the power, I think, would make him a good left tackle. But I would agree that he's probably going to have more longevity on the inside of left guard. But let's go ahead. Let's move to the secondary now, which we've definitely been busy this offseason, bringing in Snead, Owuzie. Obviously, we already got McCreary, Molden, and Hooker. The Jaguars brought in Darnell Savage and Ronald Darby from Baltimore. Indianapolis is copy and paste their entire team from last season. And then obviously the Texans brought in Okudah, and that should be their great number 2 behind Stingley. Personally, for me, I've went back and forth on this because it's really 2 guys at the top, and that's us and the Texans. Derek Stingley could be great, but I believe L'Jarius Sneed already is great. So ultimately, I think we have the best secondary in the AFC South, which should give us an edge, at least defensively this season. I think the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're ultimately in fourth just because there's not a guy on that list that puts fear in my eyes at any way, shape, or form. Indianapolis, I like what they've done and how they've built through the draft. I really like Nick Cross as far as just a pure athlete. He was a rookie last season, and Julian Blackmon, Julius Brents. They have pieces that I think are still growing and will be better this season than they were even last year, which was still pretty good. So ultimately, I have it us 1, Houston 2, Indy 3, Jacksonville 4. What about you, B. Will?
So, I agree with you on the back end of it, but at the top, I really think, Houston for me is the number one just because how they'll marry the pass rush with the secondary. So that secondary is naturally going to look a little better than ours because they'll have a little more help up front, and they've got one of the best defensive play callers in the league in DeMeco Ryans. So, that their secondary might not be better than us guy for guy, but I think they'll look better as a unit when it comes season in. Because Stingley, like you said, he's not yet L'Jarius Sneed, but he very easily could be. Desmond King, a guy that we had, exceptional slot corner, physical, sticky, very good. And Okuda is a guy that former first-round pick, a guy with a lot of potential, and he's came on over the last year or so. And, what worries me and what really puts them over the edge with ours is the safety position. Our safeties are horrific. They're terrible in Hooker and Molden. And maybe I'm a little too harsh by terrible, but I just know the standard of safety play that's in this league, and neither one of them are at the bar that we should be, especially when we look at the bar that our corners are at. So they'll be targeted. So that's something that takes us right below Houston, but we still have a good secondary. I'm not shitting on our secondary by any means. We have a really good secondary. The safeties are just really underwhelming for me, and I think it could be cause for concern, especially since we don't have a very good pass rush to marry with them. So Houston, because of DeMeco Ryans and their pass rush, will make their secondary look a little bit better than ours. Then ours, we're a close second, but it's because of those reasons that we mentioned. Denard Wilson, we got to see him as a play caller. I'm very high on him. I think he'll do really well. We've got to see how our pass rush is, man. That's a question mark for us, especially if we don't get any edge help in the draft. But that and in the safety position, it's going to be rough. But we'll see. We'll see. And then Jacksonville and Indianapolis, higher on Indianapolis than I am Jacksonville, just because, they've got guys there. They've got Cross, like you said. Blackman's pretty decent, and Moore, he's coming off the suspension last year, but I still think he'll be hungry this year. So he'll be a little bit better. But yeah, man, that's just the safety position worries me for the Titans, man. That and the pass rush.
Well, they're going to add a safety. We know that Molden is likely not going to be. He's going to be your backup nickel guy. He's likely not going to start in the backfield. So the good news is they're going to add somebody, whether that's Marcus May, whether they find a way to squeeze a Justin Simmons contract. We saw the second presser after the owners' meetings from Rand Carthon, I believe it was, where he said that they are feeling out the safety market. So what's happened is that the market has stalled because the asking price universally is high. And those safeties are agreeing to not sign because they're kind of doing like a positional, gentleman's agreement. Like, hey, don't take no BS deal. Like we need to stop the bleeding for our position. Because if a couple other guys sign for like pennies, then we're all screwed. And that's already happened. So now they're all going to have to wait until after the draft to try to squeeze as much value they possibly can. So a Marcus May is somebody like that. The Titans are going to add a safety. I'm not worried about that at all. So this already good secondary is going to get even better. But really quick to address a couple of the questions. I don't want any of those to go unaddressed. I know that we talked about Neighbors over Dunze. I think universally on this panel, I think we really like Neighbors over Dunze, maybe this much, but I'm also really high on Dunze. I love Dunze as the player. If we drafted him, I would actually be really excited because I think as a person, he's incredible. And he's an amazing athlete. So I think I'd be over the moon with either of those guys, but maybe Neighbors skill set wise gets the slight edge. And then I think, maybe offensive tackle at 38 is probably the way you go after receiver, but I'm not convinced. I kind of like the idea of signing a tackle that would plug in and play. I think we have enough developmental projects for Bill Callahan already on the roster that he can get to work with some of those guys and make it happen. So I just want to address that really quick, and I'll give you a chance to, if you guys want to address that really quick for you. Get into the secondary.
I'll piggyback that with signing an offensive tackle like a Pete or somebody like that. I think, like you said, we've got enough developmental guys. Duncan is a very good developmental piece at left tackle.
I like him.
He's very athletic, lengthy, and it was a rookie season last year for a late round pick.
He wasn't horrible. He wasn't horrible.
No.
His stats were not great, but
he's a 6th round pick at the end of the day in a rookie season, and he's going against some good pass rushers. I'm eager to see what Callahan does with him. Question: do you like Odunze over Neighbors? I think Neighbors is a better fit right now because he'll ease himself into that Ridley role, and it'll really allow a lot of versatility across those top 3 receivers. And you're talking about that skill position between the divisions is going to flip if we get Neighbors. He's our guy. And it's another thing that Jake talked about with positionless football in this offense is something that I've theorized in my head and thought about a lot, especially watching Shanahan's teams. That's, I think, where the NFL is going with this, just a whole bunch of versatility from tight end to receiver to running back. You have 5 guys that can all be interchangeable. You can line up those receivers in the backfield. You can line up tight ends in the backfield. You can line up running backs outside like they've done with McCaffrey. I think that's where the NFL is going, and we're thinking ahead in that manner, and we've got the profiles to be able to do that. So a Neighbors, that just solidifies that. Even when a guy like Hopkins leaves, we'll be able to get a guy that's a yak monster like a Malik Washington in the next coming drafts, because these guys are getting just churned out of college of those yak monster dynamic playmaker receivers. It's a 7-on-7. The youth are just doing 7-on-7s and stuff now. So these guys every year you're going to have these type of guys. So that's really what I want to see. And of course, Simmons, I'd love to get Simmons to round out that secondary just so we can get a little more meat at that safety position for us.
No, I see it the same way. Like we talked about, positionless football, I think Malik Neighbors is the perfect fit for what we got going on right now. I still love Rome. I have him as a top 5 player in this year's draft. I think he is a blue chip level talent. And if they didn't sign Calvin Ridley, I think they might be higher on Rome than they would at Malik at this point in time. But for where we stand today, I think Malik would be the pick. And obviously, if Marvin Harrison Jr. is there as well, I would have him over Rome as well. But I actually have Malik over even Marvin Harrison at this point in time. So I think Rome could kick into the slot and still be he could still be that dynamic move receiver for you. It's just not something he did a whole lot in college. He is a pure X in my opinion, but he's very versatile, and I'm not going to pigeonhole him by any means. So I wouldn't mind that as well. As far as the Justin Simmons talks goes, I'd be fine with bringing him in as well. Stoney in the comments, friend of the show, Stoney Keeley. Malik Washington Hive, let's ride. I am super high on Malik Washington. We talked about it with Mike last week. I think that's a guy you can bring in. I would be fine bringing him in at the 106, 108 pick, whichever one in the 4th, just because the tape shows it. And when you dive into like the analytics side of things, it all proves in Malik's area. I think he is a better talent than somebody like a Malachi Corley, who's getting this huge, the Debo Samuel comp that seems to happen every year. I think Malik is just a more pure receiver. He's a slot only though. So if they do pass on at 7 and they're looking at a receiver later in the draft, that's a guy I would target with a Javon Baker or a Luke McCaffrey. There's a lot of that we can go into. That brings me up to tonight. We're going live again, 7 p.m. Central with Titans Rossi. Me and Jonathan will be joining him, where we'll be drafting a full 11 starting offense from these NFL draft prospects. So definitely come tune in tonight as well and check out that second show we got for you guys. But let's go ahead. Let's talk about these front sevens. We're not going to break it down into interior defensive line, edge groups, inside linebackers. We're just going to cover them all, and then we're going to hop into our draft to end today. But when we look at the Titans, obviously inside linebacker is a huge, huge hole. They brought in Kenneth Murray, like we talked about earlier. Denard Wilson is high on Murray, but you got to have a green dot guy. So they've got to look in the draft, and that might be somebody they brought in a top 30 visit like a Junior Colson, or they might be kicking that down the road till next season. There's not a lot of openings left out there on free agency. We look at Indianapolis, another copy and paste, just like every other position group we talked about. We got Jacksonville, who already has a lot of good pieces in place. And if Travon Walker takes that next step forward, this could be number one out of this grouping for the AFC South. And then Houston, obviously, they just signed mercenaries. They're signing anybody and everybody from Aziz to Danico to Hunter. They're just bringing in everybody. And obviously, D'Amico Ryans is probably going to get them in the right place. So how I kind of see this one is Titans are in fourth, in my opinion, as far as the front seven goes. It could change, but that's where I see that. Houston in first, and then I have Jacksonville in second right behind them. But that one is like neck and neck, 1A, 1B. And then I got the Colts coming in third. How do you guys see it?
Yeah, I see it pretty similarly. And real quick, I heard those two words that I've heard way too much over these offseason, and especially at the presser yesterday. I'm tired of them asking questions about the green dot. They got to realize this green dot,
doesn't fucking matter.
You regurgitate the damn play to the defense. And it's going to be really simple with what Nard Wilson is saying. It's going to be fire zone 3. If you can't do that, that's a problem. If you can't say fire zone 3. Yeah.
You got to talk about the green dot. You got to ask Brian about his dad. You got to at least get one each presser.
We've got to get better in the press conferences. The local media has to. They have to. I mean, I'll just say that before I get into this. But the defense, front seven, Houston, like I said in the secondary, they are, with D'Amico Ryans, he's gonna get the most out of that group, and they're gonna be ridiculous. They got Anderson, they got D'Amico, they got Aziz playing middle linebacker, who's gonna be able to just fly around. Very, very good front seven. And Jacksonville, they just locked up Josh Allen. That's another reason why I'm hesitant to put a guy like Skoronski at left tackle, just because a guy like Josh Allen, how long and fast he is something that we'll have issues with twice a year at the very minimum. So, those two, 1A, 1B, you can really flip a coin with them two. I mean, just exceptional front seven-wise. I'll probably put Houston ahead just because they have the better secondary to help out that pass rush and front seven, but also they've got the better play caller in Ryans. I mean, he's a very good play caller defensively. Then I've got us over Indy or Jacksonville because over Indy. My bad. I got us over Indy. Just because, Jeffrey Simmons, I think he's better than DeForest Buckner. Linebacker-wise, I don't put as much stock into the linebacker position as others do because it's sort of I'm not going to say it's a lost art of a position, but they're in the middle, and you really focus on the outside and the front. So we've got a guy like Jeff Simmons that's going to be really good getting interior pass rush, and he's going to command some of those double teams. And if we get a one-tech that's going to command even more double teams in the run game, then that'll allow Arden Key and Harold Landry to get those one-on-one matchups on an island, which they will succeed in. That's the matchups you have to get them in. We talk about matchups with the offense. Those are the matchups we need to get them in defensively to really see them shine and allow them to do that. So that's where I'm at with the front seven with the Titans. And, we just got to improve that linebacker spot just a smidgen. But if we get a pass rusher, a good edge guy, and a one-tech or, a nose in the draft, I'll be happy with them.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you guys hit it spot on. I wouldn't say that our front seven is particularly a strength of our team, and we knew that going in, especially after hemorrhaging a couple of very valuable players for the team last year. But at the same time, at first I was a little upset about it, but at the same time now, I think it's not the worst thing that happens. I value an edge rusher at pick 38 in this draft. I really do, because I think there's a couple of guys that should be there that are very good players. And I don't love the tackles at 38. So that's another reason why I'm a big advocate of just signing the left tackle that you need, because it solves all your issues, because then you get to use those premium picks on truly talented players that solve other issues. Anyways, that's another show. But I think, I've been pounding the table pretty hard for Shaq Leonard to come in and wear that green dot. If you want to have that conversation, I think that's interesting. Quan Alexander is another guy that's still available on the market. That might be an option. But then, a trade back enters the conversation of some linebackers like this, Colson and Peyton. So you have a lot of options in which direction you want to go. I don't necessarily hate the talent we have now. Otis Reese impressed the hell out of me towards the end of last season. He played very, very well, felt very, it kind of felt like we were getting another like sideline to sideline, quick, instinctive linebacker, which is great. So hopefully he gets a chance to develop. But yeah, I'm the same. I think right now the Titans are easily the last in the division right now, but I do think that changes with a key player, a key addition or two. So we'll see what they decide to do in the draft.
I think statistically, this defense is going to look better than it even actually is on the front half, just because of how good the secondary is. They're going to feed off each other. So I think the sacks numbers ultimately will probably go up, but we might be at a detriment in the run game, which I don't believe really hurts us. I mean, I don't give a shit about the run game in general at this point in time. So, and I like Sebastian Joseph today. I think he's a good pickup, and I'm actually a little higher on Keandre Coburn than a lot of people are. I think he can be a rotational piece in that interior. I mean, this is a guy that started over T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy at Texas just last year. So I think the makeup is there for him to be a good rotational piece there. And I think you got your starters. And that brings me to the 38 pick. I'm 100% out on interior defensive lineman or linebacker there. I don't see those as good value picks. The only one I would maybe consider if they fell would be a Byron Murphy or a Johnny Newton.
Yep.
But they're not going to be there. They should not be there unless they go.
The Rams are taking one of those guys minimum. So
100%.
Yeah.
So, and then Sebastian Joseph Day, when he was at his peak, is when he was playing next to an Aaron Donald. Can Jeffrey Simmons fill that role and allow him to get back to form, which eventually got him paid by the Chargers initially? I think we can be fine there, and we can be average and still have a very, very good defense this season. So ultimately, if I'm looking and ranking the entirety of the AFC South at this point in time, just based off those positional rankings, I have Texans clear and above as the favorite. And then it's really Colts and us are tied on as far as like a point scaling, and the Jacksonville 1 point behind them. So it's anybody's race there. If I had to ultimately pick, I have Texans 1, Colts 2, Titans 3, and then Jacksonville 4. How do you guys see it currently pre-draft? Obviously, this is all going to change here in 2 weeks, but how do you guys see it right now?
One thing that I think we got to talk about too with the Titans, with their edge guys, and something sort of slipped my mind as I was talking about it, but we're not going to be that conventional Jim Schwartz wide 9 edge style defense pass rushing. So that's going to mask some of the pass rushing deficiencies we have, because we'll be bringing a lot more pressure than we have in the past, and it's going to be a lot more sim pressure looks. Guys are going to be standing up at the line of scrimmage. We're going to have 4 versatile guys that can really do anything, a lot more stunts. So that should help us a little bit, and with it's really coming to form with our secondary being so big press man heavy, that we're going to get a lot of sacks just from that alone, just from the confusion and getting wide receivers off their spot, off their rhythm with the quarterbacks, with the sim pressures and a lot of confusion up front in the box. That's something that I think that we'll be able to get the fruit of with Denard Wilson. So that's another thing with us that I think we sort of forget to mention, probably because we haven't seen it yet, but that's probably what it'll be.
That's a fair point. Like, look, L'Jarius Sneed and the success he's had off the edge. Your guy, Amani Hooker, pretty darn good off the edge when they send him. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of talent. And I think the way that the defense is going to change from an exotic standpoint is going to be pretty awesome. So I agree with you. But, yeah, I think ranking the teams as a whole, I actually have Indianapolis last. I have them 4th. But I agree with you in that it's the Texans and then the rest of the teams together. I think these 3 teams are just kind of intertwined together. To me, Indianapolis didn't get worse. They didn't improve either. So they're kind of just like, we kind of just assume the same level of play from them, if not worse, because we have not seen Anthony Richardson in a full season. So is he the guy? We don't know yet, right? So to me, it all lies within the quarterback play. And if it is at all what he showed us in the small sample size, then we might be talking about Indy being the second best team in the division. But I think right now it's probably Tennessee with the slight edge over Indy and Jacksonville, because Tennessee far and away has improved the most. And as a matter of fact, I think you could put us at like 2nd or 3rd behind Houston in the teams that have improved the most, which is comical to me when you see sports bettors saying that we're going to have the 1st overall pick next year, which is mind-boggling to me.
We have the 32nd ranked quarterback in the league.
That should probably be a whole another show in itself. But yeah, the Titans, not only did they completely change their scheme and identity, but they've added an insane amount of talent. And we haven't even gotten to the draft where, by the way, they have 2 picks in the top 40. So like, just if you could, if I take this hat and this shirt off, and I just think like logically, you're like, okay, Tennessee is one of the teams, a top 5, inarguably, team that has improved the most in the offseason. So to me, Tennessee, just based off of that, completely unbiased, is second. However, with the asterisk saying like the 3 teams under Houston are all interchangeable. Like, this is a very competitive division. This is not your grandpa's AFC South anymore, right? Like, this is a very competitive division, and I'm excited to watch it. But yeah, that's how I'd rank it.
You got some away games that'll be worth going to now, if you're able.
Oh yeah,
Houston's one that I look at the schedule like I got to go to Houston.
I'll be there.
We've got a couple this year. It's a lot more exciting than it's been in the past.
No, and it's like when I look at this division, I think there's going to be a wild card that comes out of this division as well. So we're going to have who's ever in first and whoever's in second. Whoever in second, though, like we said, you could rotate any of these other 3 teams in there. So ultimately, we're going to wrap up today. We've got our draft as we always do. And today, it's the zombie apocalypse. So we're going to be drafting NFL members, having that be current NFL players, past NFL players, current media members, coaches, staff, whoever you want. Today, we're going snake draft style as we always do. We got B. Will with the 101, Jonathan with the 102, and then me with the 103 going back to back. We're going 4 picks each. So this one could go a whole bunch of different ways. So where are we going with the 101, B. Will?
So you said NFL members, they can't be disbarred from the league?
Go for whoever you want.
Okay, so I hope not to get the podcast canceled, but I think the number 1 overall pick, this guy has a lot of experience, and with all due respect to the families involved, he has a lot of experience when it comes to protecting himself, protecting others, and he just has a mean streak about him that is unrivaled by any NFL player I've ever seen in the history of the NFL, and at least in the modern times. And I think he's undoubtedly the number 1 overall pick, and he's the top of my board, and it's him. And then it's a big gap between the others, honestly. I think he's just proven himself in this manner, and I have to go Aaron Hernandez.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a no doubter there. I'm not trading out a 1 there or anything like that. I think Aaron is the guy.
He's got a track record.
Well proven, 4 years of production in college. Exceptional.
He's got production after the season, after he got out of the NFL.
Hard-working guy, a lot of grit. The work ethic is there.
No,
I'm going to leave that one alone.
He's on my board. He's on my board.
Okay, I just didn't want to make sure I was the only one. Jonathan, I act like he wasn't on your board too.
He was. I was close, but for the sake of, I stayed away from it. But
he was one of my sleeper picks. To see if you guys went there, but you went there. So
he had the gas mask. The gas mask came out. The video came out, didn't it? Is that why he fell off your board?
No, there was a documentary that took him off my board,
and a lot of paperwork.
Oh man, good pick though. Right. Can't argue it in the zombie apocalypse.
I like it. What about you, Jonathan? Who you going with the 102? I don't know if it's going to be as good, but
well, mine was no, it's not as good. I have a lot of players on my list that I'm a really big fan of. And now that that's been picked, it kind of opens things up a little bit on what we can choose. So my pick is a little bit different now. I'm going to go with Ray Lewis. All right.
Okay.
That was my second.
Someone who's got, some history in the criminal aspect and also some history as maybe the best linebacker of all time. He's aggressive. He's physical. He's tough. He's scary. Leader of men. He's going to rally the troops. He's the leader of my group. That's what I'm going to roll with. He's the muscle. He's the brains. He's got it all.
Not bad. He'll be good close quarters as well.
No doubt.
Oh yeah. Man, you guys went violence and leadership with the first 2. So I'm going to change the pace a little bit.
He's got to clean it up.
I got to clean it up a little, kind of. At least with the first pick. With the first pick, I don't want to live in the zombie apocalypse. I want somebody to come up with a cure so we can get out of this, get back to normal. So I'm thinking smartest people in the NFL. It's Harvard himself, Ryan Fitzpatrick.
Oh, yeah.
We're bringing in Mr. Harvard. Got to bring it up every time you talk about him. So ultimately, and I think he's a cool dude. I mean, you see him talk about on broadcasts and stuff. I think I could hang out with him. But then, similar to what B-Will kind of did, I'm kind of going back into that route. And you got to have weapons. You got to have somebody that keeps that thing on him. And that's Pac-Man Jones. Pac-Man's got it on him. So we're going a little bit of opposite fields. I'm going Ryan Fitzpatrick and Pac-Man. And then we're back to you, Jonathan.
I like it. See, it's really tough. I have a very specific board here, and I'm trying to be strategic as to not have them get taken. One of my players, the person I'm the most excited about that's going to end up on my team, there's no way you guys think of this person. So I'm going to wait maybe a round to take them. But I have two people here that are on my board that are right next to each other. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and take my guy. I'm going to take the one that gets me excited. And I'm going to go with Denard Wilson, our new defensive coordinator. He's got me excited, man. We want to talk about a leader of men. You want to talk about a guy who has it figured out, who's got the plan together, and he's aggressive. You want to talk about getting aggressive and going after what you need to get after. He's got it. So I'm going to roll with Denard Wilson as kind of like a hybrid, like a mind as well as somebody who can get scrappy.
I mean, you've gone back-to-back Baltimore people right now. I mean, you might get canceled by
very,
the end of this.
Very off-brand for the colors I'm wearing. But
all right, B-Will, you got back-to-backs here.
All right, so first, since I got back-to-backs, I'm going to go ahead and get my leader out the way, a guy that's been he doesn't have a violent track record, so that might be something we have to work on once we get in the zombie apocalypse, but he's at the very minimum a very good leader, especially when leading nutcases. So he has a very good track record with that, and he's not a guy that loses. So I got to go Mike Tomlin there. I mean, he's got experience with AB. He's got experience with Plexico Burress. He knows what he has to do, and most recently George Pickens. So he can rally these guys and get them going in the right direction. So I've got him, and then another guy I've got that's got an experience, a violent. He's a violent guy, violent player. Track record of doing what needs to be done to protect himself and sometimes provoking it. Marvin Harrison, aka John Wayne, in the mean streets of Philadelphia at his car wash. He's wielding two pistols, shooting at people. I don't know why that hasn't came out yet about Marvin Harrison Jr. Hopefully it might twinkle out drafts right around draft night so he can drop to 7. But I've got to have a guy like Marvin Harrison there, man. I think he'll really be well-rounded with the team. He gives that mean streak, and he's not mean. He's not afraid to pull the pistol out.
You got to at least have it. And I actually Googled yesterday, which is probably going to put me on a search list, which was NFL players with gun problems. And he was at the top of the list. So
yes,
definitely was on my list as well. And then Mike Tomlin, I want to know what that man's exes look like when he was growing up, because he dated some crazy bitches.
He knows how to deal. He knows how to deal with personality.
Oh,
he has a gift with it.
And then at that point, is it him, or does he just attract those people because they just continually churn him out? Maybe it's him causing them to go crazy. It's just a lot of gaslighting.
Whenever he's doing, it's working.
It's working. Yeah, Jonathan, you got your third pick.
Okay. Wait, who did you take just now?
He's got
Harrison and Tomlin.
Yeah. And then I got back-to-back after you.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay. This guy does not have a track record. However, he's got the firepower. And we know this because it's all he talks about. And I'm going to go with Carson Wentz. He's got the guns for everybody. He bought his offensive lineman shotguns one year in Indianapolis. Like, this guy, he's got the firearm. He's got the experience. We got our firepower that we need. Carson Wentz. We're not going to ask him to throw any footballs. We're just going to ask him to bring the heat.
Better hope he doesn't have to run away from a zombie. He'll sprain his ankle.
That's true. That's why we got guns.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I'd rather go out on my own terms opposed to getting eaten. So maybe it's self-inflicted injury is what ends him in the zombie apocalypse. But you got to have that sacrifice. And I got some people I'd want to sacrifice on my list. I don't think ultimately we're going to get to them, but we'll talk about them later. So to end, I got back-to-back. I'm going vibes. I want Tajay Spears.
There you go.
Yeah. Positive
You got
atmosphere.
you got a lot of time on your hands at that point in time in the zombie apocalypse. You might not have electricity, so you got to be talking to a lot of people, and I want good dudes around me for that. So we're going Tajay Spears with the first pick.
Good one.
We're going Jameis Winston with the last one.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a real good one.
Same vibes. We're just hanging out. That's all we're doing. We're bunkering down, and we'll chill for the entire apocalypse. So I got Ryan Fitzpatrick, Pac-Man Jones, Tajay Spears, Jameis Winston, and you got your last pick, Jonathan.
That's a good one. All right. Insane value here in the 4th round. Are you guys ready? This is the person I've been wanting to take the whole time. And she is great. Yes, she is. Okay. And that is Tennessee sports media legend Teresa Walker. That's right.
Oh, man.
We need
Give me mom.
Somebody to come in and give us a different perspective, someone who is completely logical and can see, okay, guys, we're going to assess this the right way. Get these men under control, all right? Like, lead us in a different way. And that's exactly what we need. So my 4th round pick, Teresa Walker.
Not bad.
No, I like it. That's definitely outside the box. And, I mean, that might be your leader over Denard Wilson, in my opinion.
All I'm saying is we have an intellectual group. We're going to figure this out.
Yep. All right, B-Will. You got your last pick.
I like what y'all did. Y'all picked, leaders, negotiators. Y'all trying to take the peaceful route. I like it, but I'm all about the violence in a zombie apocalypse. Offense is the best defense. So I'm gonna have to take a guy that's been in the news a little bit. So I thought about taking drivers, Rashee Rice. Yeah, I thought about getting those guys, have a getaway driver. But nah, I'm just gonna keep with the violence. I'm gonna have to go with Terrell Suggs. He's a guy that was just in the news. We just saw a booking photo of him. He said he threatened to kill a guy. And I don't think he was playing when he said that. But he's a guy that even back when we were watching him on that Ravens team, they didn't put the camera on him much because they knew who he was. And even his teammates would shield the cameras from him. If y'all remember, they would shield the cameras from him, and they would all get around Terrell Suggs. I don't know why or what he was doing on that sideline, but he's not a guy that was on the camera much, and he was he's a big dude. We're going to look good getting off the bus before this zombie apocalypse. And he's a physical, gritty guy. So T-Sizzle, my number 4 pick, and I just chose violence all the way through, man.
No, I think we all went different routes. We got the Las Vegas, not the Las Vegas Raiders. We just got Raiders and B-Will, CTE Assassins, and then Jonathan, you trying to solve it. You're trying to start a community is what it looks like, and then I'm just a hermit over there. We got Pac-Man trying to hold us down. So B-Will's got Aaron Hernandez, Mike Tomlin, Marvin Harrison, not Junior, Terrell Suggs. Jonathan's got Ray Lewis, Denard Wilson, Carson Wentz, Teresa Walker. I got Ryan Fitzpatrick, Pac-Man Jones, Tajay Spears, Jameis Winston. We'll be posting this graphic tomorrow, so you guys can vote over on Twitter. Like we talked about earlier, if you guys are checking us out for the first time, head over to YouTube, subscribe, and then join us tonight with Titans Rossi as he comes on at 7 and when we draft offensive players from this year's NFL draft. But we're going to call it there for the day, guys. We talked about how we were going to try to keep this show at 45 minutes. We're an hour and a half in, as we usually are.
Oops.
So we enjoy everybody that's checking us out. We had a couple hundred of you guys in the chat. We appreciate all of your comments, and we'll see you guys tonight. Peace.